It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. Yeah, I'm a little late getting the show up this weekend, but I'm here to talk Star Wars regardless of how tardy I might be. The return of Poe Dameron? Maybe? Oscar Isaac has some thoughts about returning to the Star Wars universe. We'll get into that. Rogue One back in theaters? Absolutely. I'll tell you when and where. Also, a bit of discussion around the enduring love of Rogue One. Plus, we have your listener feedback to get into this week as well. If you want to support My Nerd World and a Star Wars show, head on over to mynerdworld.net. Listen to the other podcasts that I do on My Nerd World, and of course, pick up a copy of EMBARK, the science fiction space opera series.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It was the Force that called you to listen to this week's My Nerd World, a Star Wars show with me, your host, Jon Justice. Or it could have just been a notification on your smartphone letting you know there was a brand new show to a channel that you're subscribed to that has just been downloaded. Or perhaps you were looking for a new Star Wars show to listen to and you happen to be lucky enough to stumble across this very one. Congratulations. You found the best one that's out there. Hardly. Thank you for checking the show out this week. Really excited to be talking about Star Wars once again. Got a couple of interesting items to get into this week as we await the arrival of Andor on the Disney Plus streaming app. Have some listener feedback to get into as well, and a little bit of commentary on moving forward in the Star Wars timeline, especially as it relates to some comments made by one Oscar Isaac about a potential for him to return to that galaxy far, far away. But let's get into some of the news items this week and some exciting things happening that may get you back out to the theaters sooner than you expected.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
You know, hearing Snoke in that drop, reminded me of something I wanted to bring up before I get into the news items this week. I was watching the documentary, The Skywalker Saga, the one that was attached to The Rise of Skywalker, and have every intention of, I want to watch The Rise of Skywalker soon, but it's one of those movies that I don't like breaking up into segments. It's the same thing with The Last Jedi. Unfortunately, both those films are super long, so it's difficult to find a space to sit down in one sitting where somebody else doesn't want to come and occupy the TV or watch something different other than Star Wars, since that's primarily what I watch most of the time. But in that documentary, J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, who wrote the final film in the saga, talk about the return of Palpatine. Which I've expressed many times I enjoy and don't have a problem with whatsoever, despite other people's criticisms of it. But they talked about the process of landing on bringing back the Emperor. If I had the opportunity to ask J.J. Abrams a question, I would be curious if when they landed on bringing back the Emperor, despite what may have been said in the past about how the Emperor was always sort of in mind in the background, that could have been the case. I know Kathleen Kennedy has said as much, and we've talked about it before on previous episodes. But I would want to go back and ask J.J. Abrams if he had any regrets over creating Snoke, knowing that he was going to bring back the Emperor. I thought it would have been interesting. It didn't happen, and it's never going to happen. But it would have been interesting to see if Snoke had made it out of The Last Jedi and and into whatever Episode 9 would have become. I think there was potential there for some interesting storytelling, even though I do really like the fact that Rian Johnson took the risks that he did in The Last Jedi in taking out Snoke. And I can buy into this idea that Snoke was, created by Palpatine. I don't have an issue with that. J.J. Abrams was... somebody had shared a quote on one of the Rise of Skywalker appreciation Facebook pages, basically saying that, the audience tends to get hung up on things that aren't really all that relevant. And when you watch J.J. Abrams' films, he certainly does construct them in that way. He leaves open the opportunity to sort of nitpick certain things that some segments of the audience and the Star Wars fandom think are important, but really in the grand scheme of things aren't. And that plays into what I think has been happening as of late, where when Disney first took over Star Wars, they were very much adhering to this idea that everything coming out now post Lucasfilm being sold to Disney would be canon, and that everything that came before it that wasn't films would be made legends that used to be expanded universe. But now they're obviously having some difficulty keeping some of those things canonical, just because of the abundance of material that's out there right now, from the comic books to the cartoons to the actual novels to the live action shows and the films as well. All right, so let's get into the topics this week as I went off on a tangent. But that was kind of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Rogue One is returning to IMAX screens with an Andor exclusive preview on August 26th. So we have to assume this is a preview of Andor that we have not seen already in the teaser trailer and the trailer. And when they say IMAX, I mean, that also includes LIMAX. For those that don't know, LIMAX is the IMAX that you find in most larger cities, but isn't the full multi-story tall IMAX. So it's an IMAX screen, meaning the aspect ratio is IMAX, and the screen is super big, but it's not nearly as big as an actual IMAX screen. So today should be fun, because we're heading out this afternoon to go watch E.T., which my son Kyle, at 15 years old, still has never seen. I couldn't tell you the last time that I saw E.T. in an actual movie theater. It was probably when it came out in its original release. But we're seeing it on an IMAX screen, doing that thing with my fingers that I think is a LIMAX, though I'm not 100% sure because I haven't been into this particular IMAX theater yet. Really excited about going and seeing E.T. on the big screen again. More excited that my 15-year-old is going to be captive in a movie theater to watch this film, because E.T. is one of those movies where if you watch it at home with all the distractions that we have, it's entirely too easy to have your eyes and attention wander off. And to me, E.T. is one that deserves to have your full undivided attention. So we're going to see it this afternoon. So anyway, August 26th, if you want to check out Rogue One on an IMAX or LIMAX screen with an exclusive Andor preview, you can. I don't know if I'll do that or not. That's it's a Friday. I could potentially pull that off. I would be interested to see the Andor footage up on the big screen to see how it holds up. Speaking of which, and this was a comment I was planning on making later on in the show, but unfortunately, I feel like the footage that we've already seen of Andor in the teaser and the trailer is making the Obi-Wan Kenobi series look even cheaper in terms of its production. I recently went back and rewatched the entire series. I had it on kind of in the background when I was doing other things over the course of a few days. And look, I enjoy the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, but I still cannot get past the lack of production value in many of the most important episodes. I still scratch my head. I watched a couple of scenes from The Mandalorian, specifically the episode, The Passenger, where he gets chased by the X-Wing fighters, and then The Siege, both in Season 2. Because those two sequences, the one where he gets chased towards the beginning of the episode when they land on the ice planet in The Passenger, I love that I love that chase sequence is fantastic. And then the battle when they escape the Imperial compound on Navarro, and they're chased through the canyon in the Marauder, and then the Mandalorian shows up in the Razor Crest at the end with Grogu to take out the TIE fighters. I mean, if I just want some quick new Star Wars vehicle action, I'll watch those two sequences. But again, watching those sequences, I just scratch my head over the production of Obi-Wan. I just do not understand. All right, moving forward. Enduring praise for Rogue One. Rogue One has obviously been within the Star Wars fandom a topic of conversation with Andor coming out, considering Andor is a prequel to Rogue One. And with that has come the continued talk of just how overwhelmingly the fandom has embraced Rogue One as arguably the best film to come out since Disney purchased Lucasfilm. I'm not going to go so far as to say that. I love Rogue One, but I think I have other films that have come out that I love more than Rogue One. I will say that I do agree that I think that Rogue One does have the largest fan base among Star Wars fans of all the films that have been released under Disney, although of a smaller set of fans. I think The Last Jedi has the largest contingent of hardcore fans, while it might be smaller than the overall group of people that like Rogue One, if that makes sense. And getting into some of the reasons why, in my opinion, it's just a solid movie that has very little to gripe about, in my opinion. Even just as a film outside of Star Wars, if this was a one-off, like A New Hope originally was, taking place in the middle of an existing story, I think it actually works really well. Right up until you get to the last scene, because that would be a little bit more like, what happened? With the blockade runner taking off, and they've got the plans, you've got the ending of the film, but then what happens next, right? Whereas A New Hope had a very much crafted in a way that was more of a definitive ending with the possibility of another story. Rogue One, if it were to be a standalone film, not attached to any existing intellectual property, I don't think the ending would have worked nearly as well. Be that as it may, it is just a solid film with very little to gripe about. The only complaint that I would have if you were asking me, John, if you were going to complain about one thing about Rogue One, what would it be? Well, I'm glad you asked. The pacing is a bit slow. The pacing in the middle act of the film is a bit off. Really, it's only because of where the action set pieces, in my opinion, are located within the film. And I think that if we had perhaps Tony Gilroy, who came in and obviously did a lot to manicure Rogue One, who is the showrunner and the head person on Andor, I don't think that would have happened, but I think the way that the film was put together and the fact that Tony Gilroy came in and, again, had to lend a huge, huge hand to crafting the film that we've all come to know and love, that would have been a little bit different. There was an article and a podcast put out years ago by Crackedit.com, and they used to do this Cracked Movie podcast. And one of the podcasts, this goes back to 2014, 2015 maybe. But in one of the podcasts, they laid out how most of your most popular action films of the last 20 to 30 years follow a certain template, especially with a runtime of 120 minutes and just maybe a little over. One of the things is that right at the 1 hour mark is usually when you get a big, huge action sequence. And that is the case, or a turning point in the film. And it's the case for Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Star Wars. There was one more that I remember that there was a big one. I think Jaws. Like that half hour mark is usually an action sequence and a turning point in the film. You'll find that films that don't follow that particular formula, and there were a few other items beyond that in terms of time frames within those films that all matched up of certain pivotal moments happening within the story. What you'll find is stories that don't adhere to that often when you're watching them, they feel like the pacing's off. And for me personally, it's absolutely true. That's the case for, speaking of Star Wars, Rogue One. And it's actually also kind of the case for the pacing in The Last Jedi. If you were going to ask me, what would be your biggest complaint about The Last Jedi, which is the film that I think is a masterpiece. One, I think a little bit of the dialogue at the beginning of the film's a touch wonky. The exchange between Poe Dameron and General Hux was a bit iffy. Rest of it's fine, in my opinion. But the placement of the action sequences and the pacing of the film throws it off a little tiny bit. But that's often difficult to do and get right when you're looking at a movie that's 2 hours and 20 minutes. Back to Rogue One. The fact that we had all new characters with no existing headcanon, and also, spoiler alert, because they all die at the end, no responsibilities beyond Rogue One. I think that's another reason why the fans have really latched on to it, because you don't have the ability to, one, complain about where they're going because of what happens at the end of the film, and going into it, it ends up benefiting much in the same way The Mandalorian did, in that nobody had any preconceived ideas about The Mandalorian. So you can just take these characters at face value without having to deal with the baggage of existing headcanon from the fandom that feeds that negativity. Now, at the same time, I also think that Rogue One suffers a little bit from the standpoint of there isn't anything else to pontificate about the movie, so it's not a topic of ongoing discussion, say the way that the sequel films have been. And because of that, you don't really get talk about Rogue One beyond it's one of the most popular Star Wars movies since Disney bought Lucasfilm, and currently because we have Andor coming out. However, I think that Rogue One has the potential to benefit in the same way that A New Hope did. From Rogue One, I think Rogue One has the potential to benefit even more because of what we're about to see in Andor. Rogue One appealed to new fans for the reason I just laid out, while also appealing to older fans, for how well it not only feels like a Star Wars movie in terms of the way that it was shot and crafted, but also how well it fits into the story that takes place right afterwards, and also adds to A New Hope and the experience of watching A New Hope. I've said this many times. Going back and watching A New Hope now, A New Hope feels a lot more fresh. And there's the added context of all of what we experience in Rogue One, for me and this fan, really lends itself to an even more enjoyable experience in watching A New Hope from what we, again, learn in Rogue One. And it's fun for me when you consider the sacrifices that are made. Fun's not the right word. It's good storytelling for me when you consider the sacrifices that are made in that amazing end battle over Scarif and on Scarif in Rogue One, and then we get to this one-on-one battle, and I say one-on-one between X-Wings, right? The 30 X-Wings and Y-Wings going up against the Death Star. Finally concluding all of the efforts that were made and the sacrifices that were made in Rogue One, and all of these things. And I'm sure that I'm missing some, and please feel free to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube if you have anything to add in terms of why there is such enduring praise for Rogue One, or if you disagree and Rogue One isn't one of your favorite Star Wars movies, or maybe you don't even like it. I would absolutely love to hear from you. All right, let's move on to some other news this week that I find rather interesting.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
I grabbed this version of the story from Variety magazine that was out there on several different outlets, but Oscar Isaac appears to have changed his course when it comes to a possible return to Star Wars. The actor played fan favorite Poe Dameron in the most recent Star Wars trilogy with Daisy Ridley. Daisy Ridley's Rey and John Boyega's Finn, but he ended his run burnt out and doubtful he ever returned for more. However, Isaac recently said during a SiriusXM interview that he's so open to more Star Wars as long as there was a great story and a great director. And this is just a little anecdote here, but typically, in my opinion, when you have a circumstance like this, with an actor making a comment like this, typically it means they're already involved in something. If they're willing to return and there's a great story and a great director, it always feels like that's a setup to somewhere down the line we feel like, oh, guess what? Oscar Isaac is now involved in blank story in blank film with a great story and a great director. He goes on to say this, I don't know, I'm open to anything, you never know. He said this when he was asked about returning to the Star Wars franchise. He said, I have no real feeling one way or the other. I'm open to any good story. Time is the one thing that becomes challenging as you get older with kids and all that. Where do movies fit in? If there's a great story and a great director, and Lucasfilm President Kathy Kennedy came to me and was like, I have this great idea, then I'm so open to it. So, what could possibly happen with this? Eckert's Ladder is a YouTube channel that I follow that does a lot of great Star Wars videos. And I believe it was his channel that mentioned how Rogue Squadron, which had been shelved, but Kathleen Kennedy had said would be made somewhere down the line, could end up being a sequel to The Rise of Skywalker with Poe Dameron training a new set of pilots. And I still contend that we have yet to see the implications of what a massive success Top Gun Maverick is. And because of that, which films are going to come out that were inspired to try to sort of capture the overwhelming popularity of this latest Tom Cruise movie. And I could absolutely see that. The Poe Dameron being the trainer, a la Tom Cruise, right, to a new set of pilots who then have to go up against a new foe. You could make this a movie taking place after the Rise of Skywalker that is not an episode 10, but you could include, just as sort of a test, a testing ground, an emerging enemy that could lay the foundation for more stories involving Rey and Finn post The Rise of Skywalker. If you haven't watched the new Lego Summer Vacation special on Disney+, we get to see a bit of what is happening with our characters from the sequel trilogy after The Rise of Skywalker. You have Rey training Finn in how to use the Force, and you still have Poe Dameron doing his pilot thing. Now, while the Lego shows are a bit loose in terms of canon, they are still considered canon by those at Lucasfilm. So I could absolutely see that. Whatever they do moving forward in the film franchise, and I hope we get a new announcement of a new film soon, but whatever they do moving forward in the film franchise, I hope the creators take a cue from Top Gun Maverick. And also the latest Predator film, which is the prequel Prey on Hulu. I own all but one of the Predator movies. I don't have Alien vs. Predator Requiem, but I have all the other ones. And I enjoy them all for sort of various reasons, even though a lot of them aren't great. The Predator films, and certainly not the Alien versus Predator. That's more of just kind of a fun one to throw, a fun trash science fiction mashup if you want to just wipe out on different types of aliens going and killing each other and humans being their fodder. That being said, the new prequel in the Predator series, Prey on Hulu, is fantastic. It is so good. If you enjoyed the original Predator but weren't into any of the Predator sequels, I definitely would encourage you to go and watch Prey on Hulu. Like Top Gun Maverick, both films are fantastic and relatively straightforward in their storytelling. And that's what I think Star Wars needs. That's not to say we didn't get it in the sequel trilogy. I think that The Rise of Skywalker, and actually I think all three films, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, all were executed in a way that I didn't feel were very muddled. Be that as it may, they still were not as straightforward in terms of their objectives. The Last Jedi is a different film altogether as it relates to that. So you had a bit of a MacGuffin in that movie as they were heading off to Canto Bight, but that kind of ends up falling by the wayside as Rian Johnson takes to subverting our expectations. But Hulu on Prey and Top Gun Maverick both have a fantastic beginning, middle, and end. They have great story. They have great, great straightforward objectives, high stakes, and characters we genuinely care about. And while I love so many of the MCU movies that have come out, I mean, just a lot of them are just big sort of muddled messes. I mean, the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I know by the very nature of the film, it's the Multiverse of Madness, but it's that film is dense to a fault and has characters that we're supposed to be caring about that I just don't end up giving a rip about. And I do think that beyond the lack of any injection of political correctness and wokeness, whatever you want to call it, agenda within Top Gun Maverick, it's just a great, solid movie. And Prey is exactly the same way. And so, again, to circle back, I that moving forward, that the creators over at Disney and Lucasfilm take a cue from those and bring back to the big screen a film that it doesn't need to be stripped down, but just pull it back and just give us a good story. It's one of the things that's so enduring about E.T., like we're going to see today. It's not overly confusing or complicated. He's stuck on a planet and he wants to phone home and get home. And there's a kid that ends up going through this amazing arc as a child growing up in the middle of this whole thing. It's just fantastic. Give us more of that. And don't try to go for so much bombast. What do you think? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. As always, you can leave a comment up on YouTube as well. We have just enough listener feedback to dive into this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Got to thank a friend of the show, David. He had sent me a message saying how much he enjoyed last week's episode. I appreciate that. Went down the road of politics in our Star Wars and some of the articles that have been released talking about Andor, and one of the actresses in the film saying that it was an allegory of a Trumpian era, right? In the middle of when you just can't turn on the news without seeing any of that political nonsense. But there was also controversy swirling around an Obi-Wan Kenobi comic that I don't think I got into last week, and I'm not going to get into now. However, I did get a couple of listener feedbacks relating to the topic of politics. The first one comes from friend of the show, Miranda, who says that politics are a poison pill in our society. Yup. Politics in the story, depending on the execution, doesn't really faze me that much. It's the commentary around it that does. Totally agree. And how much people give it so much power and exaggerate that's why we have gotten these groups in the fandom menace, but the reason why they even exist in the first place. And I totally agree with that. George Lucas's comments about inspiration in the original trilogy, post their release, decades post their release of those films, it's kind of irrelevant now. Those times in politics when the movies were being made, both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, when you're looking at sort of historical precedent and inspiration from politics, when it's in the past, it's sort of easier to digest as being from back then, and you kind of blow it off. But when we're getting this, to what Miranda was saying, when we're getting this ahead of an actual release, it's completely unnecessary, in my opinion, and it just ends up causing more division. Miranda goes on to say, I would like it if more people would admit to contributing to this destructive cycle of a war on words and a war on opinions and a war on the PC climate. Yeah, you're never going to see that, though. Too many people are stuck in their ways, and even in politics, we're stuck in our fandoms. That's what it's turned into right now. Politics has just turned into fandoms. And when it comes to fandoms, you choose your side, and then you stick by that side regardless of what that side does. And I don't care what side you're on. It's really unfortunate that happens to be the case. Even if there's wrongdoing going on, there's not enough people to step up, even on the, on the same side of the person who may have done wrongdoing, to say, hey, that's wrong, because they've turned into fandoms now. And people that are beholden and loyal and faithful to a sports franchise, regardless of how bad they're doing, like a Detroit Lions fan. Right? It's the same thing when it comes to politics right now, and it really is toxic in our society. All right, one more. SheVP writes, disclaimer, this is my opinion. I do not speak for Jon Justice or his channel. To which they also go on and say, you don't even have to mention this comment, John. Well, I'm going to anyways because I appreciate it. This nonsense really set me off. For this actress to make that kind of statement before a show has even begun just shows how much of a bubble these people live in. And that really is what it comes down to. That's not to say people aren't entitled to their opinion, but as SheVP goes on to write here, it really does speak to how many people just think that it doesn't matter if there is anybody that feels different than me. SheVP goes on to say, the left thinks everyone thinks the way that they do. And they're the least self-aware people on the planet. I tend to agree. There are people on the right that are the same way. I just don't see them as often. I'm a conservative talk show host, if you hadn't figured that out yet, by the way. I never mentioned it on the show, but I think it's a little hard to hide it. But I also don't care who listens, and I hope everybody listens to my show. And I hope they listen to my show, and even if they happen to be a Democrat or a liberal, they listen to what I have to say and still enjoy it, knowing that you're entitled to your opinion. I don't care. I'm just talking Star Wars here. If you happen to disagree and have a completely different set of ideologies and political opinions, that's totally fine, man. You do you, and I'll do me. Star Wars is for everybody. Anyway, SheVP goes on to say, if they want to allow Trump to live rent-free in their heads for the rest of their lives, that's their problem. I couldn't care less. The only thing I want from Lucasfilm is for them to create good stories. That's the only thing I care about. Yeah, and I totally agree. They can inject politics, and it's always going to be an inspiration for content creators and writers in these, right? I mean, you can't. I did it in my EMBARK series. Anybody who's read my EMBARK series, if you pay close enough attention, if you want to extrapolate something, especially in the last book of the opening trilogy, The Vanishing War, there are some incredibly political overtones and implications and things that I was inspired by in the real world in that last book. I'm not going to tell you what they were. I want to leave it ambiguous and enjoyable for the reader, but there absolutely was. I wasn't trying to send a message when I was writing it by any stretch of the imagination. But I was definitely inspired by modern-day politics that helped me craft the ending of that book and the resolution there in it. So, people can go and take whatever message they want to take and apply it to whatever political fandom they want to apply it to. I don't care. I just hope that they have a good time reading my space opera stories. Speaking of which, you should treat yourself, a friend or a family member, with science fiction. It's written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. You can get EMBARK Book 1 today in ebook at the discounted price of just 99 cents. Also, the entire 7-book series, which completes a story, is available in hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. For EMBARK Book 1, the story goes as follows. Taft Guardia loves his ship. The interstellar T-craft was a custom job like the ones his self-proclaimed squadron of friends flew. But the lethal machine needed upgrades, and the modifications couldn't have come at a better time than when fellow pilot Keith Amaro arrived needing his help. When he eagerly agrees, they embark on a quest to uncover a mystery left behind by Keith's late aerospace engineer father. But Taft and his beloved ride are soon pushed to their limits, as he learns of an industrial catastrophe threatening all of life on Earth. When dark forces seek to exploit the global evacuation, receive word of the power in Taft's and Keith's possession, the hunt is on. Can Taft stay alive long enough to save his friends and stop the threat to humanity's future among the stars before it's too late? If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with just a little bit of romance, and a lot of action, that EMBARK is perfect for you. Go to Amazon.com right now. Stop what you're doing. Go there right now. Why are you still here? I said go right now. You can also go to mynerdworld.net. I'll wait. Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or again, go to mynerdworld.net, and you can hit the links there on the homepage to check out the books there. Also, on mynerdworld.net, if you missed it, I did an interview with a fantastic local media outlet called Alpha News. It is available on the blog page at mynerdworld.net. If you're interested, you should go and check it out. It's a nice little 15-minute interview that I did with my friend Liz Cullen. We talk about the difficulties since the passing of my dear best friend Drew. A little less than a little more than over a month ago now. I guess we're heading up on 2 months. Still, sadly, seems like it happened yesterday. Also, I talk just about the radio show that I do Monday through Friday here in Minneapolis on Twin Cities News Talk, and a bit about my books as well that I've spent the past few minutes promoting that I hope you will go on to right now and buy. If you missed it, Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. All right, I'm wrapping things up. I'm going to go see E.T. and watch him phone home and hopefully see the tears well in my 15-year-old's eyes. I know that sounds really strange, but I hope that he's emotionally grabbed by this movie. I'm really curious to see what kind of impact it has on him, seeing that he's just beyond the age of what Elliot was in the film. But I remember what an impact it had on me, and it's one of the best motion pictures ever made. So I'm super excited. Logan, my 20-year-old, has seen it before, but I couldn't tell you the last time he saw it. I'm just shocked that Melinda wants to go see it because I know that she's not the biggest fan of that movie, and I do not know why. So, all right, thank you for checking the show out. I hope you'll go and pick up a copy of the book if you haven't already. And if you have and you haven't gone and left a review for the books that you've read, please go to Amazon.com and leave a review. I need all the reviews that I can get for all 7 of the books in the series. And so if you've left a review for one but not another, I hope that you will please just go and share a ratings review or a written review. Regardless of how you felt about them, I could really use them, and I appreciate it. All right, we'll talk to you again next week. Until then, I hope wherever you are in a galaxy far, far away, you are happy, healthy, and safe. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.